Welcome to our channel, Billion Dollar Brands. Season 1, How They Make Money. Episode 2, How Apple Started, The Origins of a Tech Giant, From Garage to Apple. Part 1, From Garage Startup to Apple One. In 1976, in Los Altos, California, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak teamed up to build a personal computer. Jobs was the visionary, Wozniak, the technical genius, and Ronald Wayne, the often forgotten third co-founder, handled the business paperwork. Wozniak had built a computer for fun, just a hobbyist project. Jobs saw its potential as a product. With barely any money, they began building units by hand, funding the project by selling personal items. Jobs sold his VW van. Wozniak sold his HP calculator. Fun fact, Ronald Wayne sold his 10% stake in Apple for just $800. Today, that stake would be worth over $250 billion. The Apple One was a single-board computer. No keyboard, no screen, and definitely no case. It was sold as a bare circuit board. They priced it at $666.66, not for symbolic reasons, but because Woz liked repeating numbers. The first big break came when Paul Terrell, owner of the Byte Shop, ordered 50 units, under one condition. They had to be fully assembled. That was the first time Apple had a real commercial order. They assembled them in Jobs' parents' garage. They ended up selling about 200 units, generating enough momentum to think bigger. Most computers at the time were for hobbyists or corporations. Jobs and Woz wanted to build a computer for the masses, intuitive, accessible, and designed with simplicity in mind. They weren't just building a machine. They were laying the groundwork for a new relationship between humans and technology. Jobs once said, "The computer is the most remarkable tool we've ever come up with. It's the equivalent of a bicycle for our minds." To fund growth, Jobs approached Mike Markula, a former Intel executive. Markula believed in Apple's potential and invested $250,000. Along with a vital business plan and credibility. He also helped incorporate the company. Apple Computer Incorporated was officially formed on January 3, 1977. This marked the end of the garage era and the beginning of Apple as a real company. Apple's first product didn't change the world overnight, but it planted the seed. In the next episode, we'll explore how Apple scaled from this small success to a global IPO, and how the Apple II changed everything. Part 2. Apple's Big Break. How the Apple II and Macintosh changed tech forever. The Apple II, released in 1977, was one of the first computers to come in a plastic case, complete with a keyboard and color display. It was user-friendly, sleek, and it just worked. Key innovation? The use of expansion slots, making it ideal for business software like VisiCalc, the first-ever spreadsheet program. This turned the Apple II from a hobbyist machine into a business tool. Sales skyrocketed. By 1980, Apple had sold over 100,000 units and was earning millions. In December 1980, Apple went public. Shares started at $22 and skyrocketed. By the end of the day, Apple had created more than 300 millionaires, the most in history at the time. Steve Jobs, only 25, became a multimillionaire overnight. But with this new wealth came more pressure. Apple was no longer a scrappy startup. It was now a publicly traded company expected to perform. In the early 80s, Jobs visited Xerox PARC, where he saw something revolutionary. The graphical user interface. Icons, windows, and a mouse. Jobs knew immediately. This was the future. Apple poured resources into a new machine, the Lisa. It launched in 1983, but with a price tag of nearly $10,000, it flopped. Still, the Lisa laid the groundwork for something greater, the Macintosh. In 1984, Apple launched the Macintosh with one of the boldest ads in Super Bowl history, directed by Ridley Scott. The ad portrayed Apple as a rebellious force, shattering conformity, aka IBM. It aired only once on national TV, but it made history. Internal politics and declining Macintosh sales created tension. Jobs clashed with then CEO John Sculley, whom he had helped recruit. By 1985, Jobs was pushed out of the company he helped create. But before we get there fully, next episode, we explore his fall, exile, and the company's near-death experience. Part 3. Apple's collapse and Steve Jobs' return. In 1985, tensions between Jobs and Apple's board reached a boiling point. Jobs wanted control. The board sided with CEO John Sculley. The result? Steve Jobs, co-founder and visionary, resigned. He wasn't done. He started a new company, Next Incorporated, focused on building high-end computers for education and business. While Next hardware never took off commercially, the software platform they built, Next Step, would later become crucial to Apple's future. Without Jobs, Apple lost its focus. It launched too many products, with confusing names and overlapping features. The 1990s saw a rising competition for Microsoft Windows, which was improving fast and running on cheaper machines. Apple's market share began to shrink. Developers moved to Windows. The brand lost its cool. Meanwhile, Jobs was busy elsewhere. He had also bought a small division from Lucasfilm in 1986, Pixar. Under his ownership, Pixar created Toy Story in 1995, the first fully computer-animated feature film. It was a huge success. By 1997, Pixar went public and Steve Jobs became a billionaire. Ironically, his biggest financial success at that point wasn't Apple, it was animation. And over at Next, the software operating system was getting noticed, especially by engineers at Apple. By the mid-1990s, Apple was bleeding cash. In 1996, it lost over $1 billion in a single year. The company needed a modern OS to compete with Windows. After several failed internal projects, they turned to an external solution. In 1996, Apple announced it was buying Next for $429 million. That deal brought back Steve Jobs. Initially, Jobs returned as an advisor. But by 1997, he was interim CEO. Later, that became permanent. This marked the beginning of one of the greatest turnarounds in business history. Microsoft would invest $150 million in Apple and continue to support Microsoft Office for Mac. Jobs focused the company on innovation, design, and simplicity. He also brought in Johnny Ive, a young designer who would become crucial to Apple's design revolution. Part 4. The Golden Era of Apple. In 1998, Jobs and Johnny Ive launched the iMac, a translucent, colorful all-in-one computer. The slogan? Think different. It was bold, different, and a sales hit. Over 800,000 units sold in the first 5 months. The iMac wasn't just a product. It was Apple's new identity, fun, design-forward, and user-focused. This was the first step toward mainstream relevance again. In 2001, Apple launched the iPod, a digital music player that held 1,000 songs in your pocket. But the iPod wasn't just a gadget. It created lock-in. If you used iTunes, you stayed in Apple's ecosystem. iPod sales exploded. By 2007, Apple had sold over 100 million iPods. It turned Apple into a cultural icon. In 2007, Steve Jobs walked on stage and announced, "Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone." It had no physical keyboard, just a touchscreen. Critics were skeptical, but it was a hit. Apple sold over 6 million first-gen iPhones. Each generation only got better. And in 2008, the App Store launched, creating an entire economy and giving Apple control over software distribution. Apple's margins stayed high. Its brand became aspirational, and loyalty unmatched. In 2011, Steve Jobs passed away after a long battle with cancer. His death was mourned worldwide, but the company he built was stronger than ever. Jobs' legacy? Vision, obsession with simplicity, and products that change how the world communicates. Apple's journey from garage to global dominance is a story of vision, risk, failure, and reinvention. It's a masterclass in product design, marketing, and building customer loyalty. If you enjoyed the series, hit like, subscribe, and check out our other episodes on how they make money. From Amazon to Netflix, we break down the empires that shape our world. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode.